How do you deal with death? Not just physically, but spiritually. Notice this. Numbers chapter 19 gives Israel a strange ritual involving a red heifer, ashes, and water, all to deal with the impurity caused by death. Why? Because death contaminates everything it touches. Today, we'll uncover the deep symbolism behind this ritual, how it prepares us for Christ, and I'll give you one practical step to deal with the subtle death residue that clings to your soul in this episode of Biblical Unlocks. This show is designed to help build your habit of reading the Bible, understanding the Bible, and applying it in your daily life. And if you enjoy episodes like this, please consider following and rating the show. It's free, it helps me out a lot, and you can always change your mind later. Now let's get a little bit of context on the chapter. So, as we pick up in Numbers chapter 19, Israel is still in the wilderness. God has just clarified priestly authority. That's what we saw in Numbers chapter 16 to 18. Aaron's role and Moses' unique role as a mediator, right? And now in Numbers chapter 19, he's going to give instructions about purification from contact with death. Anyone who touched a body became ceremonially unclean for 7 days. Since death was unavoidable in such a large camp, God provides a unique ritual, the sacrifice of a red heifer, whose ashes are mixed with water to cleanse those defiled by death. And this chapter is about holiness in a world where death is present, and it answers a pressing question: how can a holy God dwell amongst a dying people? So let's take a look at this chapter in full. I'm going to read the first 6 verses, and we're going to focus on the red heifer sacrificed outside the camp. That's important. And we're going to go through a deep biblical unlock trying to understand this chapter, or this section of verses. So let's read verse 1 to 6. Verse 1. The Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, "This is a statute of the law that the Lord has commanded. Tell the Israelites to bring you a red heifer without defect, in which there is no blemish, and on which no yoke has been laid. You shall give it to the priest Eleazar, and it shall be taken outside the camp and slaughtered in his presence. The priest Eleazar shall take some of its blood with his finger and sprinkle it 7 times toward the front of the tent of meeting. Then the heifer shall be burned in his sight. Its skin, its flesh, and its blood, with its entrails, shall be burned. The priest shall take cedar wood, hyssop, and crimson material and throw them into the fire in which the heifer is burning." Biblical unlock number 1. Purification comes through a sacrifice which is removed from the community. That is, holiness is restored by something taken outside. Because if we notice, the red heifer is slaughtered outside the camp, right? Outside the camp in Numbers chapter 19 verse 3. Unlike other sacrifices, it is not offered on the altar in the usual way. It is burned completely with cedar wood, hyssop, and scarlet yarn. Why outside the camp? The fact that it's outside the camp represents separation, the place of rejection and impurity, yet that is precisely where cleansing begins. An interesting parallel here as well is Jesus in Hebrews chapter 13 verses 11 to 12. I'll just read this now. "The high priest carries the blood of animals into the most holy place as a sin offering, but the bodies are burned outside the camp. And so Jesus also suffered outside the city gate to make the people holy through his own blood." The idea here is that the place of rejection and impurity, that is precisely where the cleansing begins. Okay, let's read verses 7 to 10 now. The ashes are going to be gathered and stored for future cleansing. Verse 7. "Then the priest shall wash his clothes and bathe his body in water, and afterward he may come into the camp. But the priest shall remain unclean until evening. The one who burns the heifer shall wash his clothes in water and bathe his body in water. He shall remain unclean until evening. Then someone who is clean shall gather up the ashes of the heifer and deposit them outside the camp in a clean place, and they shall be kept for the congregation of the Israelites for the water for cleansing. It is a purification offering. The one who gathers the ashes of the heifer shall wash his clothes and be unclean until evening." Now the verse I want to focus on in particular is verse 9. "Then someone who is clean shall gather up the ashes of the heifer and deposit them outside the camp in a clean place, and they shall be kept for the congregation of the Israelites, for the water of cleansing. So God turns a moment of death into a stored remedy for future impurity. What is this? What is happening here? The ashes are gathered and kept for water for impurity. The sacrifice is not a one-time event. The effect is preserved. The ashes represents death already being judged, and the impurity of death is counted by the ashes of a prior sacrifice. In other words, death is defeated by a previous death. Obviously, I think some of you will be able to identify the immense Christological significance in this, as we read in Isaiah chapter 53 verse 5, "By his wounds we are healed." Because the ashes represent death, the judgment has already been stored, but the storage of these ashes turns a moment of death to make sure that there is a future sacrifice for our iniquity. Okay, so let's read verses 11 to 16 now. This is the focus here is the idea that death brings a 7-day impurity. And my question to you is, what does death represent spiritually? I want you to understand this whilst we're reading these verses. Verse 11, "Those who touch the dead body of any human being shall be unclean 7 days. They shall purify themselves with the water on the 3rd day, and on the 7th day, and so be clean. But if they do not purify themselves on the 3rd day, and on the 7th day, they will not become clean. All who touch a corpse, the body of a human being who has died, and do not purify themselves, defile the tabernacle of the Lord. Such persons shall be cut off from Israel. Since water for cleansing was not dashed on them, they remain unclean. Their uncleanness is still on them. This is the law when someone dies in a tent. Everyone who comes into the tent and everyone who is in the tent shall be unclean 7 days, and every open vessel with no cover fastened on it is unclean. Whoever in the open field touches one who has been killed by a sword, or who has died naturally, or a human bone, or a grave shall be unclean 7 days. So you'll notice something interesting. Death is contagious. That is the deep biblical unlock number 3, because it is both contagious within a spiritual sense and within a communal sense. Touching a corpse, entering a tent where someone died, even touching a grave makes a person unclean for 7 days. God is teaching Israel something deeply profound. Death is not neutral. It spreads, it stains, and it disrupts communion. This is not just a biological consideration. It's a theological ramification. Death is the result of sin. We saw this in Genesis chapter 2 verse 17. We saw this in Romans chapter 6 verse 23. We saw this in Romans chapter 5 verse 12. For through one man sin entered into the world. Wherever death is present, holiness is disrupted. Okay, let's read verses 17 to 22, which is the final part. And the focus here is going to be how water mixed with the ashes cleanses the unclean. So, how does something from death bring purification? Let's read verses 17 to 22. For the unclean they shall take some ashes of the burnt purification offering, and running water shall be added in a vessel. Then a clean person shall take hyssop, dip it in water, and sprinkle it on the tent, on all the furnishings, on the persons who were there, and on whoever touched the bone of the slain, the corpse or the grave. The clean person shall sprinkle the unclean ones on the 3rd day, and on the 7th day, thus purifying them on the 7th day. They then shall wash their clothes and bathe themselves in water, and at evening they shall be clean. Any who are unclean but do not purify themselves, those persons shall be cut off from the assembly, for they have defiled the sanctuary of the Lord. Since the water for cleansing has not been dashed on them, they are unclean. It shall be a perpetual statute for them. The one who sprinkles the water for cleansing shall wash his clothes, and whoever touches the water for cleansing shall be unclean until evening. Whatever the unclean person touches shall be unclean, and anyone who touches it shall be unclean until evening. Alright, final biblical unlock, number 4. Living water applied to the residue of sacrifice restores fellowship. I just want you to notice something really important here. Ashes are mixed with living water, running water, and sprinkled on the unclean person. The living water plus the sacrificial ashes results in purification. It's not enough that a sacrifice has happened, it must be applied. And the ritual shows something important, that cleansing requires both a death that satisfies judgment and living water that restores life. As we see in John chapter 19 verse 34, when the Roman centurion pierced the side of Jesus, what came flowing out of him? Blood and water. That is, the blood of Jesus cleanses us from all sin, and it's a little hint to what we read here, that ashes which are mixed with living water and sprinkled on the unclean person results in purification. So immense Christological significance in this chapter. Let's go a little bit deeper and see how this particular chapter fulfills Jesus Christ. So we've already talked about this briefly, but Numbers chapter 19 is one of the clearest shadows of Christ in the wilderness. The red heifer is slain outside the camp. That's alluding to Hebrews chapter 13 verse 12. We have a complete burning of the heifer, that is the total sacrifice. The ashes of the heifer was preserved to signify the enduring atonement. The living water applied to show the spirit-powered cleansing of the sacrifice, and how blood and water both spilled out of Jesus' side when he was killed. Jesus fulfills the red heifer. He absorbs death's contamination and becomes the source of purification. As we read in Hebrews chapter 9 verse 13 to 14, "For if the blood of goats and bulls and the sprinkling of defiled persons with the ashes of a heifer sanctify, how much more will the blood of Christ purify our conscience?" Alright, practical application of this chapter. You need to identify the death residue. There is spiritual death residue that often people carry without knowing. What are you carrying? Are you carrying bitterness, shame, secret sin, grief which is unprocessed? Don't ignore it. Numbers chapter 19 shows that impurity doesn't fade on its own. It must be cleansed, and bring it to Christ in prayer today. The sacrifice has already been made, so apply that cleansing. Like the water mixed with ashes, it must be applied. Confess specifically. Receive forgiveness deliberately, and don't live as though death still clings to you. Alright, so that's it for this episode of Biblical Unlocks. Next we're going to enter Numbers chapter 20, and we'll see Moses himself fail at the rock. If Numbers chapter 19 shows how death contaminates, Numbers chapter 20 shows how frustration can cost even a faithful leader entrance into the promised. It's sobering and it's deeply instructive. So Numbers chapter 19 whispers a quiet but powerful truth. You live in a world where death touches everything, but God has already provided cleansing. The sacrifice has been made. The water is ready. You do not have to carry what Christ has already burned. Take one step today. Name the deathly residue, receive the cleansing, and walk in restored fellowship. And smile. You are not contaminated beyond redemption. Until next time, stay clean in a dying world by clinging to the one who conquered death. And don't forget to follow the show and rate. It's free. It helps me out a lot. You can always change your mind later. Otherwise, just have a blessed day. And remember, if you're not in your word, you're in your feelings. Godspeed.